and Representative Estes that should be here yet. And Johnson, yeah. All right, we don't have any guest replacements for today. Today, we're going to do an overview of the Kansas School Finance, just to kind of get us a refresher on the details, and we'll turn that over to Jennifer and Matt. We'll go with Jennifer first.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. As always, it's lovely to see you. Jennifer Light, KLRD. The document I am going to talk from is the Kansas School Finance Memo, which you have all seen before. So it's the white memo that's on the top of the pile of papers in front of you. There were questions that were asked regarding the funding for school finance. And so we're just going to touch on the school finance system memo lightly, and then I'm going to let Matt kind of come up and talk a little bit more in depth about the tax side of it all. But I do want you to have an idea and a reminder as to where exactly we are looking at in the school funding when it comes to the mill levies. So it does actually touch several different sections of the school finance formula. So we're going to start, if you go to page 9 of the memo, that's underneath state foundation aid. And so I just want to draw your attention to the fact that the school facilities weighting, which is on page 9, the ancillary facilities weighting, which is on page 10, and the cost of living weighting on pages 10 and 11 are all backed into due to mills. So this is specifically for, they have specific requirements for how they can go ahead and raise mills for these weightings. I do want to note the school facilities weighting has not been used for the last several years, but it is technically still in statute, so we do want to call your attention to it as one of the items that does use the mill levy in its discussion point. If you look at page 10, under the ancillary school weightings, we take for that, and the school district can apply to the Board of Tax Appeals for the authority to levy local property taxes for the purpose of financing the costs attributable to commencing the operation of a new school facility. The formula that we come to is the authorized property tax levy divided by base. So when I say we are backing into the weightings, that's what I mean by backing into it. We're taking the amount that was the authorized property tax levy and then dividing it by the current year's base number, and that is how we're getting to those weightings. So it's only if a school district chooses to use the school facilities weighting, the ancillary schools facilities weighting, or the cost of living weighting, that those are being used. Not every school district does use these weightings. The other area, and I don't want to dive really deep into this because we're going to talk about special education later in the week or next week, is I do want to draw your attention to the fact that the special education weighting is also backed into, but it is not backed into using the mill levy. It's backed into using the amount of money that we use for the state special education state aid. And so it's backed into that way. It is not included in the state foundation aid dollars. We do not use the special education weighting to figure out state foundation. We do not use the special education weighting to figure out state foundation aid. It is included for the purposes of figuring out a total foundation aid. So, but since we were talking about backing into weightings, I did want to mention that that one is not done through a tax levy, but is done through the special education state aid. Outside of what the state foundation aid formula, which many consider to be the base formula for the schools, The mill levies touch how schools receive funding for their local option budget. So page 13 starts the local option budget. And I guess, Madam Vice Chair, if you have questions about the 3 different weightings, I'm happy to stand for questions on those before we move on.
Do we have any questions? Seeing none, go ahead.
Okay. So statute, as you know, allows the local school boards to adopt a local option budget in addition to their state foundation aid. And so, as I mentioned, there's a modified total foundation aid. And then the part that is important with the mill levies is that there is an LOB authority. So KSA 725143 requires every school district to adopt an LOB of at least 15%, and that can be up to 33% of their total foundation aid. Of this amount, it's usually between 15 and, for this year, it's 32.05% of their district's total foundation aid that they can do without bringing anything to a resolution. If they want to go between that 32.05% and that 33%, they do have to adopt a resolution and then publish the resolution, and then there's a protest petition that can happen, which would change whether or not they'd be able to use it. So, as it stands now, school districts are required to adopt the local option budget. And then what happens after that is that the local option budget is primarily funded from the 2 sources. It's funded from local property taxes, and it's funded by state aid. So when we talk about the supplemental state aid, which is the second bucket that we often talk about when we're talking about the consensus revenue estimates, we're talking about this portion of aid here. And so I want to draw your attention to the fact that supplemental state aid and capital improvement state aid replace portions of the school district's funding. So it's creating an equalization for property tax relief, whereas capital outlay state aid is in addition to the amount raised by property taxes. So when you're talking about these different sections, the way that the mill levies interplay with the funding is different for all 3, but when you consider supplemental state aid and capital improvement state aid, that is replacing the amount of money for that is done through property tax, whereas capital outlay is included as a supplement to the amount raised by the local property taxes. So for supplemental state aid, we use an equalization formula that starts with an 81.2% threshold for the school district's average valuation per pupil. For supplemental state aid, one of the big differences between it and the capital outlay and the capital improvement is that it uses a 3-year average for the AVPP. So it uses the 3 preceding school years to come up with their average, their AVPP, and that is how they start to, and that is what we use for the equalization formula. We then take the average AVPP of the district, or of the school districts for this year at the 81.2%, and that gets us to A. And if A is greater than 1, there is no supplemental state aid that goes out. If it's less than 1, then there continues to be a formula where we take what the local option budget is and we times it by the equalization rate. We do have handouts in your packets for each of the 3 supplemental state aid, capital outlay state aid, and capital improvement state aid for fiscal year 2025, which is school year 24-25, which does the breakdown for you. They're at the back of your packets with the colored paper. So that is how, when we're talking about mill levies, part of the funding for supplemental state aid comes from the money that is raised by the local property taxes, and part of it comes from the supplemental state aid. Supplemental state aid can change for a school district each year because it is based off of the AVPP across the state and who is falling at that 81.5%. So it's recalculated every year. It does use the prior year's property tax valuation. They don't use the current year property tax valuation. It does use the prior year. I am happy to stand for questions on supplemental state aid or just keep going forward with some of the others.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any questions?
Sorry. If I went and asked for the total budget for the year, then I would work backwards to figure this out, or would they give me all these numbers?
So within every USD, they do present a budget that goes to KSDE where they have to work out and show what they believe the percentages are going to be for the aid from the state. That is verified and checked by KSDE, and of course, go from there. But they do have in their budget paperwork online on KSDE's website, it does include documents which work through how much they expect to be receiving in their budget for the year.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Representative Ousley.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And thank you, Jennifer. And I was trying to read along here, just on page 13 underneath the local option budget. It doesn't say what the intent of the local option budget was. Can you kind of give us just a real brief intention of this local option budget?
So my understanding of what happened is before the state started working with the state aid portions of the budget, everything was done at the local level. And so when in '92, when they started moving to that the state was going to be providing more of the money, there was the beginning when they said they were going to include the supplemental state aid in the local option budget, and then it has continued on since then. I would not be able to speak to the intent of the legislature at that time, but I do know that it was included at the beginning of the '92 formula.
Okay, and that's my understanding also. Maybe I can follow up with Nick and get verbiage pulled from the statute.
Thank you, Nick. Any other questions?
And I appreciate that all of you have heard me talk about this memo multiple times, so thank you for listening to me share a little bit more about it once again for you. But we just thought it would be a helpful reminder before we started getting into all the different mill levies that are being offered through a school district's mills. So the next one that I want to talk about is actually capital improvement state aid, because I want to focus again on the ones where we're replacing the portions of the school district's funding. And so with the capital improvement state aid, some school districts are eligible to receive their capital improvement state aid to help pay the costs associated with capital improvement bonds. There have been multiple bond amounts over the course of the last 10 years. So there are bonds that were approved by voters prior to 2015, bonds between 15 and 17, bonds between 17 and 22, and then bonds after 2022. Each of them uses AVPP to be able to figure out how much the bond is going to be worth. So if a school district has bonds from 2015, that's prior to July 1st, 2015, they would continue to use that statute section even though we're in 2025. So when we talk about these different sections between pages 19 through 23, really it's what year did the bond occur for how the capital improvement state aid goes. And so obviously bonds approved by voters on or after July 1st of 2022 has a slightly different calculation than those from 15, but each of them do use AVPP to calculate the amount of capital improvement state aid that they would get. So when a school district is working through their math, they also have to do the calculations for when the bond was done and then go from there. So happy to talk about individual sections of this as far as the walk through the process for how it comes together. I do want to point out that when on page 22, when we talk about District 6, it kind of walks through, hey, if you have a bonds that occurred in different years, you can kind of see the process for how they would figure out the calculations for each of those bonds. But I know also that capital improvement state aid gets very deep in the weeds very quickly, so I'd like to stay here at the surface level to see if you have questions there before.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, or Vice Chair, I guess, not Co-Chair. Anyways, Jennifer, if the school district does qualify for capital outlay, the state pays their portion immediately, and the school district then gets a bond for the rest. Is that right? Or does they get a bond for the whole part, and the state pays their part as it goes along?
So my understanding is that they do the bond and the state pays aid to pay back the bond.
Is that how?
I'm thinking through that to make sure that that is, yes, that's my understanding, is the bond goes out and then, okay, well, good. I'm glad I have the head nods behind me that I'm remembering that one correctly.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, seeing none, go ahead.
Okay, so the final section of the big buckets of school finance when we talk about it is the capital outlay state aid. That's page 16. So the capital outlay state aid is used to fund capital outlay expenditures, a list of which you can find on page 16. This includes computer software, housing and boarding pupils enrolled in an area vocational school operated under the Board of Education, school buses, other fixed assets. Basically, it's for the acquisition, construction, repair, remodeling, additions to, furnishing, maintaining, and equipping of school district property and equipment necessary for a school district's purposes. So in order to adopt the capital outlay levy, a school board must adopt the resolution providing for their taxing authority, and this can be up to 8 mills. They must then publish the resolution in the local newspaper, and then there is a ability of the school district's members to sign a protest petition if they so desire. So once they have the authority, they can choose to do less than that authority. So if they have the authority to do up to 7 mills and they come back and look at it and say, actually, we really only need 6 mills to cover this, they can go lower. They cannot go higher than the amount that they put in their petition, but they can go lower if they find out that property tax is actually higher than what they were expecting, so they didn't need as many mills. So as we were talking about the state equalization for this, it does not replace local property taxes, but it supplements the property tax. And for this one, then we take the revenue from the mill levy and we multiply it by the state aid rate, and that gets you to the capital outlay state aid rate. The difference for this one is that instead of the 3-year average, it's 1 year. And it's instead of it being at 81.5%, it starts at 25% for the median school district. And then for every $1,000 in AVPP below that median, the percentage increases by 1%. And then the opposite way, it decreases by 1%. So again, the way that the property tax comes in and it plays with the equalization formula changes each year based on the AVPP, but it also can change based on the median district in the state. So Again, this is a high-level reminder of what we've talked about before in here. Happy to dive into this a little bit further, but really this is just trying to give you an idea that when we're talking about how property tax valuation plays with the school finance formula, it is not just in one way. It deals with all of these different buckets, with several of the weightings within state foundation aid, within these other areas that are also considered within the school finance system that is provided by the state. And all of these are considered while we do the consensus revenue estimates. And with that, I'm happy to stand for questions on any of the above. I'm going to touch briefly on 20 mills after this, but it's going to be really short.
Do we have any questions? All done, I see none.
Okay, so really quickly on the 20 mills. The 20 mills is provided by state statute to be collected. So it is collected, brought to the state, and counted as part of the funding for state foundation aid. It is not a mill levy that the school can choose to change the amount on. That is decided at the statewide level and then collected across the state. In fiscal year 2025, there was $830.4 million collected from the 20 mill levy. Additionally, on top of that, thanks to 2024 special session Senate Bill 1, there was $67.5 million, which was transferred from the SGF to the 20 mills. And this is due to the fact that in that special session, SB 1, the property tax exemption changed from $42,000, just over $42,000 to $75,000. And so the transfers to make up the difference between what would have been collected in the 20 mills, between that $42,000 and that $75,000, and then what was collected from that 75 above is that $830.4 million. So again, 25 is the first year that that transfer happened. So it's the first year where that has come into play. It is also considered when we're doing the consensus revenue estimates and the consensus for the education caseloads, we do consider how much money is coming in from that as well, which can affect the amount of SGF required for state foundation aid.
Jennifer, could you clarify which document you're working out of now?
I actually am not working off of any of these. I just was giving you a lovely little high-level overview of the 20 mills from my head because the 20 mills often is discussed, and there can be some confusion between whether it is a property tax that the school district has any authorization to change the amount on. And so as we are talking about the mill levies and what school districts have the authority to change and ask for, as we, for the rest of this, the 20 mills is outside of that, but does come into play when you're talking about the state foundation aid.
Do we have any more questions? None so far.
I love this. I'm going to turn it over to Matt for a little bit here.
Afternoon, committee, everyone else. So the rest of the documents, by and large, will be mine. I will attempt to not recount too much of what Jennifer just went over. So if I do, I apologize, and feel free to throw something at me, and I will move on. First, I will note the next part in your packet should be this lovely gold. It says K-12 Education Glossary. This is something we put together for the funding task force over the summer. It just is a bunch of definitions for kind of general education terms, both funding related, mostly funding related. And so we'll cover some of the terms kind of going through today, just to help either right now or in the future when someone asks you something, or you're going over something and want to remember what that exactly means. Moving on, then the next part I'll touch is the PowerPoint slide that is a singular slide that I printed off that titled USD Taxing Authority by Category. I will note these categories are ones I came up with today. They are not official categories. So if you have name suggestions, thoughts, feel free to let me know. But I thought, given that there is a large amount of kind of independent taxing authorities for schools, trying to group them together might make it a little more easy to try and wrap one's head around. So out of this, I kind of came up with 4. So the first bucket, and the first of the 2 we'll mostly focus on, is the school finance formula levies. So that is the 20 mills, the general fund levy, the cost of living, and the ancillary and the new schools facilities, all of which Jennifer had gone over. Those are ones that are levied and directly impact the formula, either through providing funding to be distributed via the formula or being remitted to the state and returned to districts as weightings. The second category in the upper right is the state equalized levies. Those are the 3 that Jennifer went over, where they are local levies and those local dollars stay within the district, but the state is providing some form of aid, either as replacement or supplemental kind of additional monies to enhance those. The bottom left, and then the bottom 2, I won't touch on as much in detail because they are much either smaller or not nearly as many districts utilize them. So you have the other authorities for things like adult education programs, no warrant funds, special assessments, et cetera. And then you have subunits of government, which is where school districts or select school districts have authorities to essentially be the levying unit for either establishing or providing a tax base for other units, in this case, historical museums, public libraries, or recreation commissions. And again, I'll kind of touch a little bit on that towards the end, but not overly deep unless one or more of you is really interested in it, in which case I'm happy to address what I can. So moving back to that kind of, well, I guess I'll pause. Any questions to start with? If not, I will kind of move on to the next one and dive into the school finance formula levies.
Do we have any questions? I don't see any.
Brilliant.
Continue.
All right, so the next is a KSDE document that has mill rates on the front. And I will note everything from here on out going over is for the 24-25 school year, just because those are what we have actuals for, and we're able to pull all the information to keep it consistent. So this mill rate reports from KSDE kind of generally will go over a lot of the overview. The main element, the first element I want to draw your attention to, though, is on page 6. Where it lists a bunch of levy funds. So to Representative Wilson's question earlier, most of these different levies that school districts make are tied to specific funds within their budget that those tax dollars, that revenue would be deposited. So for instance, you see 08 Supplemental General Fund. That is where their LOB levy would be deposited in for them to use, to transfer to other funds, any other kind of lawful means of it. The capital outlay 8 mil levy would go into their capital outlay fund, et cetera. So this kind of helps provide a guide. So if you are looking at a district budget or, again, have kind of questions, you can kind of see where some of those taxing authorities might line up with where to find them within a district's budget, and also where to look for expenditures. So then on the following page, on page 7, kind of dives into to the 20 mil levy. As Jennifer noted, the main, a big element of this one compared to most other levies is that you have this exemption for residential homes, this state exemption. And so you'll see on the example on the bottom where basically it shows how this kind of plays out. So generally, and for every other school levy that isn't the 20 mil general fund levy, you're going to take the market value of the home, going to take 11.5% of that. That determines what the assessed valuation is, multiply it by the mill levy, and that is the property taxes you owe. When you're looking at the 20 mills, and again, this is just for residential homes, not commercial property, not any other class, you're going to take that, in this instance, 200,000, and you're going to subtract 75,000 from it. And so then you are starting from a new base of 125 when you then take that 11.5%. And so essentially that is reducing the assessed valuation of a home, so that for the 20 mil purposes, you were paying less on taxes than you would for 20 mils from any other school district levy, from your city levy, from most of the others, because it is deflating that home value that then they calculate the assessed valuation from. The districts, when they collect that 20 mil levy, it is remitted to the state. It goes into a state fund, and then when, during the estimates and just in general, when calculating how much state general fund money is needed to fund the finance formula, the revenue from that 20 mils is one of the elements that kind of goes into it first to see how much then is kind of left that needs to be funded by SGF. So with that, that's kind of, I will pause for the 20 mil for any kind of further questions.
Representative Steele.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Matthew and Jenny, thank you so much for your presentation so far. And I'm not sure which one of you can answer this, but I believe we had the 67.5 that had to be transferred from SGF, and that this was the first time this year. Is there an estimate again of how much that would be this coming year, or where are we kind of looking at? And does anyone know if that is included in the current budget?
Madam Vice Chair Representative, I will let Jennifer answer that, as I believe she has the info.
Thank you. Jennifer Light, KLRD, for the sake of the video. Yes, as part of the consensus revenue estimate, we do put a estimate out for the fiscal year 26. When we're doing the consensus revenue estimate, it is for the current year and then 2 years out. I'm going to pull up the one so I could tell you exactly how much was estimated for the out years. Just taking my second, a little longer. So the estimate transfer from the fall 2025 consensus is $70 million. And then so that's for fiscal year 2027. And then fiscal year 2028, we're looking at an estimate of $71 million. So that's the transfer portion in 26, because what I gave you earlier was the 25 number. So the 25 number was that. The 26 number that we're estimating from the fall estimate was $69.1 million. And then, again, $69.1 million. This is what happens when I look at thousands in my sheet here. So $69.1 million for 26, $70 million for 27, and $71 million in 28 is the transfer from SGF to the 20 mils fund.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have any more questions? Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do we know where the 11.5% came from? Do we have any idea why we just didn't say 3 mils on the 200 or the 125,000?
So,
Who's in charge of the math that came up with this?
so Madam Vice Chair Representative, I believe those percentages for determining assessed valuation are in the Constitution. As far as the percentage of evaluation that you take to determine the assessed valuation.
Thank you.
Any more questions? All right, you may continue.
All right, thank you. So, and then on this memo, kind of the next, so pages 8 and 9 provide some state totals that KSDE has for some various elements that kind of give you a high, median, or a low, median, and high for a variety of these. But then I will draw your attention on page 9. They do provide a bit of a history on the 20 mil exemption as far as seeing that in tax year 21, so the 21-22 school year, it was 20,000. And then you see it kind of grow to where it is now with the 75,000. So that is kind of what I had for that document. The next couple, which is the Kansas School District mill rates, and then the legal-sized 8.5 by 14 are both ones that are just showing the actual rates for districts. The smaller one is a KLRD one where we have kind of condensed a lot of it to just make it a little fewer columns and kind of capture some of that at a higher level. The 8.5, the legal size one, the 8.5 by 14 is a KSDE report I pulled down that will show you for every district and kind of breaks them all out. So if you're really wanting to see kind of the individual mill rates for each possible item for school districts within your district, that one is going to give you the more kind of detailed version of it within statewide kind of averages up top. I will note, I don't know if it's, I presume it's the case for most of them. I know, at least from my experience, though, is that when you are looking at tax assessments, you will usually see school districts have a lot more of a breakdown of a variety of different, the different rates, and I believe that is in part because of just the different statutory authorities that you're pulling from. But that's what there are. As you can see, there are a large amount of rates that they are possibly able to leverage for various purposes. Because I guess this is the other where I will note that while school districts are kind of local units of government, in some ways similar to cities and counties, the school district's taxing authority is not nearly as broad in the sense that all of these different levies they have typically have very distinct purposes as to what their use is. A lot of them will have kind of constraints or requirements in how they are calculated or bounds upon which, which the levies are determined versus a city or county which has some broader authority to just determine, we need X amount, and so we're going to set a mill levy. And so even with all of these authorities, they are fairly well kind of constrained in those instances of being more detailed than what you see with some of the other units of government. And so I guess, yeah, from there, the other three that we back into as weightings, I can go into details if you're interested, but again, to Jennifer's point, the main thing is that a district that qualifies for it works through the process, determines what amount of money or what amount of mills they're able to raise, they levy those taxes, those are also remitted to the state, and then they are given a weighting that corresponds to whatever that amount of money is, and then it is returned to them through the finance formula. And so that is where, again, similar to the 20 mills, while they are local dollars that are levied and they are returned to the district, it is different from something like local option budget because they are coming to the state and getting filtered back through the formula. So, all right. So I can stand for any final questions on kind of those school finance formula levies or move on to the three that have the equalization aid formulas and go from there.
Do we have any questions on the mill levy? Everyone good?
Okay. All right, so starting off with local option budget, this is the blue sheet. We tried to do them in different colors to help make tables that are going to look fairly similar stand out a little bit. So as Jennifer noted, the state does provide equalization aid, the idea being that or utilizing the assessed valuation per pupil as a means of trying to kind of determine a district's amount of assessed valuation or taxable value that it has. And so on all of these sheets and on the blue one, the first 6 pages will correspond to it being organized from the largest equalization rate down to 0, and then the last half of it has it organized by USD number. So again, it'll be a little easier to find if you're wanting to look for specific districts. Otherwise, you'll just see some of the math here on what Jennifer spoke about as far as the 3-year average valuation per pupil by district, what its equalization rate is as far as a percentage, and then what their local option budget is and what that supplemental state aid corresponds to. And yeah, so generally, and again, just to note that this is supplanting the local effort. So for instance, I'll just kind of pick 461 Neoda Shea. It's about a third of the way down. So it receives an aid rate of 68.9%. So basically what you will see in that column of their local option budget is that utilizing that formula and with the rate they chose and everything, their LOB would be 2.35 million. And then the state aid of 1.6 million is supplanting local effort. So if you take the 2.35 and subtract the 1.6, that difference is then the amount that the district has to raise locally. So they would say, okay, we need to raise, we're responsible for some quick math, let's say about $800,000. You take that, you divide it by kind of your assessed valuation, and you back into figuring out we need to have a mill levy of X to raise that amount. And so it is, as Jennifer discussed, it is relief in the sense of it is lowering the amount of money that those districts have to raise locally. And it will draw down. As you will see, there are quite a few districts that have 0% or receive a fairly small amount, and this will fluctuate every year based, and so if a district gains or loses students, if their evaluations were to go up or down, and or how all of that happens in relation to every other school district in the state are all kind of factors that will impact where a district falls in this ranking and what percentage, if any, of supplemental state aid they will receive. Because again, since it is comparative, you could have a district that has theoretically 0 changes and they could still receive or gain in the amount based upon what other districts in the state are experiencing. So I can go ahead and pause there since this is the first of the tables we're going over, take any questions, and then I can kind of go through the other two and pause for questions pretty much at the end.
Do we have any questions? Representative Wilson?
So does this include federal aid, these numbers?
Madam Vice Chair, Representative, no, this is just this is just their local option budget as determined through the finance formula. So essentially, the school board having decided whatever in that range of 15 to 33%, they want as their rate, taking that percentage times what they are getting in the state, in the foundation aid formula, and then that's their local option budget. That is essentially what they are able to raise locally, and then putting that through the equalization rate to figure out what amount of that local authority the state is providing as additional aid versus what they are actually raising locally. So this would not account for any federal. This is just purely their supplemental general fund or local option budget.
Okay.
Any more questions? Okay, you may continue.
Perfect. Easy enough. So moving on to the more vibrant green one. So this is capital outlay. So capital outlay is different in that it is a flat up to 8 mils worth of property tax. I guess I didn't cover it, but just as a reminder that 1 mil equals $1 of tax on $1,000 of assessed valuation. So essentially a district at most can charge $8 per $1,000 of assessed valuation for capital outlay. Capital outlay can be used for a variety of elements, as you can see in our finance memo, that can range from desks and other things, kind of durable things in schools, to building repairs, to new facilities. Again, a lot of those kind of more durable and just kind of larger elements. And then you will see it has a pretty similar formula to the supplemental state aid, other than that it only uses the prior year's assessed valuation per pupil rather than a 3-year average. And then the final, or I guess the other element along with that is that instead of supplanting local revenue, it is adding to it. Because again, since it is 8 mils, if you were pulling 8 mils off of not a lot of assessed valuation, you're not going to be bringing in much revenue versus the same amount or even a lesser amount at somewhere with a high valuation. And so, again, for instance, we'll take 504 Oswego, third on the list there. If you go over to the right, you can see they are charging 7.986 mils, where they were last school year. That brought in, or utilizing the math of it all, should bring in somewhere around $121,000. They qualify for 100% of capital outlay state aid, and so then the state would provide them an additional $121,000 to what they also raised locally to, I guess you would say, enhance or to supplement that, versus a district that receives less or 0%, where it is just the amount or a much smaller state contribution as to what they've raised locally. Again, I can stop there if there's anything, or I will continue on to capital improvement, which is the last of the 3 that I have colored sheets for.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So what limits a school district from going to the 8? Is that just, do they have to justify these, or just the overall, the fact they don't want to charge more, the citizens won't let them charge more? I'm just curious why they are at 8%.
Madam Vice Chair, Representative, so statute just has the flat cap of 8 mils. Beyond that, I think, other than if I remember right, I was reading something, but there might be Jennifer, is this also when there was the protest petition with the capital outlay that you talked about? But outside of some potential protest petitions or things, it is largely on the school board, I think, to just decide and kind of set it, again, like you would with other, which they do with other tax bases, or like other local governments would do with setting tax bases. But it is a hard state cap at 8 mils, so they can't exceed that. But within there, they're going to have, I think, quite a bit of freedom.
Jennifer, do you have anything for us on that?
Just that I can confirm that Matthew is right, that there is a protest petition available for the capital outlay 8 mils as well.
If they go over the 8 mils, or up to the,
My understanding is that the statute says 8 mils. It doesn't say they could go over the 8 mils for capital outlay.
or where would the protest?
Oh, the protest petition would be for if they're wanting to, whenever they want their taxing authority to do up to the 8 mils, they have the right. So I believe that would be that each year that they want, if they wanted to do it, they'd have to. But I can double check that for you.
That's fine, I'm good.
Yeah,
So thank
I can double check.
Any other questions? Nope. All right, you may continue.
All right, so the final one of these lovely spreadsheets is the kind of lavender purple paper. This is capital improvement. And so I will note, I forgot to add a footnote to it, but this is both for the 20 estimates for the 24-25 school year, but also for a bond done after 22. Because again, as Jennifer noted, there's multiple different formulas based upon when that bond was passed. This is utilizing the newest, kind of the current one for a bond being passed to go forward. Once again, it uses assessed valuation per pupil. It is slightly different than, unlike the other two, this does specifically exclude virtual students. So the FTE enrollment counts you will see on this are smaller than what is listed on the capital outlay, because it does remove virtual students. And then the other component is, rather than having that 81.2 percentile or that 25%, and working kind of up and down like with the prior two, this one says take the second lowest school district, that one would receive 51%, and then for every $1,000 above that second lowest, you're going to remove a percent until you hit 0. And so it is still kind of the same ideas, but rather than picking an element in the middle where you will have ones above and below, this just goes off of the second lowest and goes up. And so theoretically, you could have a realm where the second lowest district stays potentially stagnant and the others increase, and you see a gap widen that you would not necessarily see with the other two formulas. Beyond that, again, pretty similar. And so again, if there's any questions, I'm happy to address that specific one. And then if anybody wants more information on the other kind of categories, I'm happy to go over that or any other kind of questions. I know this is a lot, and even at an overview is pretty in the weeds, so.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? They're letting us off easy today. All right. Yes, it's because you did such a good job last year that we understand it. All right.
All right, well, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Committee, if you do have questions that happen afterwards, please let Jennifer or I know. We are always happy to help.
All right, committee, do we have any questions or any comments? All right, committee, with nothing else today, does anyone have anything? All right, we're dismissing a little early today. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Representative Steele. Representative Schmoy, second. All in favor, say aye. All right, we will be adjourned.